Hi, my name is Joe Miranda, and I'd like to share a little bit of my experience with the Kolbe Ministries and how it has impacted my life, not only inside prison, but outside the prison walls. So, going to my younger days, I was raised Catholic. I never really attended Mass, and that's I was staying with my family, staying with my cousins. I was raised with my grandparents, and they did all they could to give me what I needed. So I was baptized and I did my first communion, but none of that really had an effect on my life. I'm from a South Texas town, and our childhood friends, we grew up together, we became really good friends, a bunch of us, and we gave ourselves a name, which later on became a gang. And as we grew up, went to high school, we did things like drinking and things that kids typically do. And as I matured, or as I got older, I turned to not only selling drugs but using drugs. And with all my friends, that's what we used to do. And when one of my friends got shot and killed, I took it upon myself to not to turn to God and to take it into my own hands, and that landed me incarcerated on a capital murder charge. And at this point in my life, I didn't have no thoughts of God. I didn't think of God. I didn't want to know anything to do with God leading up to this point. And for me, if I look back on the person I am now to when I was at this time, at my age, at the age of 22, when I was incarcerated, I see that God was always trying to work His way into my life, but I was always on a different path. And I was always not listening to what God wanted for my life. And when I got incarcerated, I knew that for me, that was the end. I could do no more. I was on a capital murder charge. My bond set at $1.5 million. No one was going to get me out. It was hard. It was hard knowing that I was 22 and my life was over with. For me, that was my fleshly thought. My life is over with. So, just sitting in that jail and not wanting to turn to God because everything that I had said against God, I blamed my best friend's killing on God, and instead of asking God to help me with that, I turned to myself, and I ended up in jail, which later on ended up in prison. And having been humbled in that jail cell with no one else, with nothing else to turn to, I turned and asked God to help me. And whoa, did God come through. And just seeing the change as far as asking God to come into your life, asking God to help you, and genuinely asking for help, not just because I wanted to get out, not because I needed it, but because there was nowhere else to turn. I was at the rock bottom, and God at this point, God started showing me like a baby. When you feed a baby, you feed them with milk, and God started feeding me, and I knew that there was no other answer but then God showing me that things weren't over yet. I was still in the jail. I was not in prison. I wasn't sentenced yet. I was still looking at a life sentence. At the very minimum, a life sentence. And we had volunteers coming in. And of course, these weren't Catholic volunteers. They were volunteers. And I came to know Jesus Christ. And I came to know His love and His forgiveness. I remember one day sitting on some tables, and the volunteer comes in and he says, "There's somebody in here that is saying, 'Lord, hear my prayers.' And I want to know who it is." And I couldn't say nothing, even though I didn't remember at this time where this prayer was coming from. I was saying it, "Lord, hear my prayers." And he said, "I know somebody's in here saying that. You keep crying out to God for Lord. You're saying, 'Lord, hear my prayers.'" Verbatim what I was saying, this man was asking who was saying this. And I couldn't open my mouth, and he said, "You know what? Your life's not over with." He said, "You might think that your life is over with, but God has something for you." And right after the service, I went and I told him, "You were talking about me." And I went with that. That affected me. That touched me, and I started on my road. There was a time when I went to jail, and I said, "You know what? My life's over with. I'm going to go to prison, and I'm going to make prison my life. I'm going to do what I have to do to survive, and I'm going to do exactly what I did in the streets." And when God really touched me, there was no way I could go to prison like that. I ended up getting 20 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and I went to prison. And when I got to prison is a different world. Everything you see on the movies, that's what I believe prison was. Before this time, I had never been locked up more than 24 hours. And when I got to prison, it's a whole different atmosphere. It's a whole different world. Just as soon as you get there, everybody's there. They're sharks, and you have to survive. But somehow God put people in my path that helped me, genuinely cared about becoming out a better person. I'll fast forward a little bit to, at this time I was not a Catholic no more. I used to tell myself, "Joe, you're not a Catholic. You're not a Catholic no more. You're now a Protestant Christian," which is fine. God was working in my life.